Imagine giving an order that gets your commanding officer and 210 men killed, and then having to explain for the rest of your life why you did not die with them. That was the position Major Marcus Reno found himself in after the Battle of the Little Bighorn in June of 1876. Reno had fought through the Civil War and years of frontier campaigning before that day, but none of it prepared him for leading 3 companies of the 7th Cavalry into a Sioux and Cheyenne village that turned out to hold thousands more warriors than anyone in the regiment had expected. He survived. Custer did not. And in the aftermath, that single fact turned Reno into one of the most controversial figures to come out of the entire campaign, accused of drinking, accused of running, court-martialed twice, and eventually pushed out of the army in disgrace. His name only cleared decades after his death by a military review board that went back and reread the record. What most people never hear is that Reno left behind his own detailed account of what happened, how the attack began, how he was forced back onto a hilltop, and how his men survived a night and day siege while a few miles away, Custer's command was wiped out to the last man. This is that account in his own words.
The order came down from Custer to strike the village, and I put my column in motion, crossing the river and covering roughly 1.5 miles of open valley before the shooting started. It came sporadic at first. A shot here, a shot there, off to our front and flanks, and then it built steadily until there was no mistaking it. Whatever numbers Custer believed we were riding against, they were wrong, and I understood that fast. We pressed on until it was obvious that staying mounted against that many warriors would get the whole command cut down in the open. I ordered the men down off their horses and into a skirmish line on foot, spread out with carbines working. But even fighting that way, we were losing ground with every minute, forced backward faster than we could dig in. There was nothing left to do but pull the whole command back toward higher ground, a hilltop, where our horses and mules had already been sent under guard. It was a rough, running fight the whole way there, men on foot and mounted mixed together, warriors pressing us from more than one side at once. Once we reached the bluff, I had every man take what cover he could. Low brush, the shape of the hillside, anything, and we started trying to scratch out some kind of defensive position with almost no time to do it. By about 5:30 that evening, the attack came in full force, hitting us from several directions simultaneously. Heavier fire than I had faced in any engagement before it. Bullets came in low over the sagebrush and kicked up dirt along the crest of the hill, and the men learned quickly to keep their heads down and fire in short bursts rather than waste rounds on targets they could not clearly see. We held on through the rest of daylight and straight into the night that followed, trading shots with an enemy. We mostly could not see anymore, just muzzle flashes and the sound of horses and men moving in the dark around our position. There was no way to know, hour to hour, how many warriors were actually out there in the darkness, or where the next rush might come from. And that uncertainty wore on the men almost as much as the fighting itself. Near 9 o'clock the fire slackened, and the warriors pulled back off the hill, though we could hear them the whole night. Voices, movement, fires burning down in the valley below us. We used every minute of that quiet to strengthen our line. There had been no chance to bring proper tools, so the men dug in with whatever was on hand. Knife blades, tin plates, canteens, carving out shallow trenches through the dark hours, expecting the fighting to start again before we finished. It held off until roughly 2:30 in the morning on the 26th, and then it came back hard, a sustained assault that ran from before first light until about 9:30. Through that whole stretch, they also worked over our horse herd from a rise that sat just outside the range of our carbines, and we lost stock steadily with no way to stop it. Around 8 in the morning, the weight of the attack shifted onto Colonel Benton's stretch of the line, close enough that one warrior rode in nearly on top of a fallen soldier, trying to count coup before he was shot down himself. By then we had a mounting number of wounded and almost nothing left to give them to drink, and the situation had reached the point where we had to act. Water sat about 600 yards off. Down toward the river, across ground, the Indians had been covering with fire the entire fight. Colonel Benteen put together a party of volunteers to make the run, with a skirmish line laying down cover while they went. Every man in that party knew exactly what he was walking into, and they went anyway, canteens and camp kettles in hand, moving in short rushes down the slope, while the covering fire kept the warriors on the far bank pinned down as best it could. It came at a cost. 1 man killed, 6 more wounded, but they made it back with the water, and it went straight to those who needed it most, the wounded men, who by that point had gone most of a day without a drop. Through the rest of that day, the Indians kept up pressure on our position, though it had a different character than the fighting before. Looser, less committed. I watched a large fire take hold down in the valley, throwing a wall of smoke and dust across the whole basin, and behind that screen, the warriors appeared to be pulling out in an organized column, moving off toward the Bighorn Mountains, something like 30 miles distant. Watching that movement, I let myself hope for a moment that it might be Custer finally coming up to reach us. None of us yet knew what had actually become of him, and the 5 companies that had ridden off with him. That truth did not reach us until the following morning, when General Terry's column arrived. Benteen and his men were sent out across the battlefield where Custer had fallen, and it was they who confirmed the disaster and identified the officers among the dead. To make sense of how the command ended up on that hilltop in the first place, you need to go back to how the attack itself began. I had been placed in command of Companies M and G, and the order Custer sent me, delivered by Colonel Cook, his regimental adjutant, was to advance rapidly and charge, with the promise of full support behind me. That message was the last direct instruction I ever received from him. Cook rode alongside me briefly, as did Captain Keogh, who told me plainly that they were coming along with the advance, that he was coming too. Once we crossed the ford into the valley, though, I never laid eyes on either man again. As it became clear how large the force in front of us actually was, I sent a rider back to warn Custer, but I kept the charge going, trusting that the rest of the regiment was following close behind the way I had been told. Closing on the village, I saw warriors moving in around my left flank, cutting off my line of retreat, and I understood in that instant that no support was coming, that 3 companies were about to face that village alone. I pulled the command off their mounts and into a stretch of timber along the riverbank, the only cover available. From the timber, I got the horses secured and pushed forward again toward the lodges, closing to within roughly 200 yards before the Indians met us in numbers too great to hold against. There was only one way out. I ordered the charge back through their lines toward the bluffs across the river, and we fought our way through. Not long after, Colonel Benteen and Captain McDougall reached us there with their own companies. It turned out the route we had stumbled onto in that retreat crossed a ford none of us had known existed, and that crossing was what let us reach the high ground at all. Once there, I had roughly 112 men and 25 scouts left under my command. I have thought often since that had we not made that charge for the bluffs, we would have met the same end Custer's men did. Looking back, the single greatest error going into that fight was misjudging how many warriors that village actually held. Something on the order of 2,500, at minimum, possibly as high as 5,000. In all my years in the cavalry, I have rarely encountered fighters as capable as the Sioux and Cheyenne we faced that day. Captain Anson Mills said the same, having faced many of those same warriors under Crazy Horse a week before at the Rosebud. As for Custer's own fight, from what I have since pieced together, Lieutenant Cook held on with genuine courage until nearly the end, staying mounted even after Custer himself had gone down, leading repeated charges with what men remained around him. Curley, the Crow Scout, and the only man confirmed to have made it out of that part of the field alive, said the Sioux drew back again and again in front of Cook's small group, before finally closing in and finishing them.
350 men made it off that hilltop alive because of the decisions Reno made under fire, decisions that, on paper, look like exactly what a competent commander should have done against odds like that. History did not treat him that generously. Within months of the battle, rumors were circulating that he had been drunk during the fight, that he had frozen or fled rather than pressing the attack, and those rumors followed him for the rest of his career. He took command of the shattered 7th Cavalry after Custer's death, and a formal court of inquiry in 1879 looked into his conduct and cleared him of the worst of the accusations against him. That verdict did not protect him for long. A scandal involving another officer's wife led to a 2-year suspension in 1877, and in 1880, a second court-martial found him guilty of assault and drunkenness on duty, ending his military career for good. He spent his final years trying, unsuccessfully, to clear his name, and died of cancer in Washington, D.C. in 1889, buried at first in an unmarked grave far from the battlefield. It was not until 1967 that a military review board finally went back through the original documents and testimony and changed his discharge to honorable, and his remains were reinterred at Custer National Cemetery, on the ground where his men made their stand. His account remains one of the only first-hand records we have of what actually happened on that hilltop above the Little Bighorn. If stories like this, told by the people who actually lived them, are what you are here for, hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one.